Wonderful. Hey, Bill, great job on that last presentation. I really enjoyed that. And in fact, it made my job a lot easier now because I don't have to get into a whole bunch of stuff you already covered. So essentially, VGrid is a biomass energy company. We convert biomass into electricity. And there's a very important byproduct, which is carbon itself, which we can sequester or store in the soil. And so we are a net negative carbon company in that we remove CO2 from the atmosphere using trees and plants and crops. And rather than letting all of that CO2 go back into the atmosphere when those plants, trees, and crops die, we convert that into energy and then sequester the carbon. So this is a very famous slide. This came out of the Paris Accord. This shows the level of CO2 in the atmosphere measured from an observatory in Hawaii in parts per million over the last number of decades. And you can see there's a fairly steady rise. And actually, if you zoomed in on that line, you would see a sawtooth type oscillation. And that's because the Northern Hemisphere has more plant life than the Southern Hemisphere. So when the Northern Hemisphere is growing from spring to
Greg,
fall.
could you shift the slide? Shift the slide.
Yeah, we're still looking at the title.
Oh, the title. Okay, we're still looking at the title slide.
You're shifting that one, not this
Okay, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
It won't, okay.
one.
Look, I know that it's a major point and you wanted to have it stressed. Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
you see it now?
No, it's still on the garden, on the field. We're like, those are not spinach. What is that? That looks like greens or it's like not kale. Looks lovely though.
I'm seeing your Mauna Loa slide, CO2 slide now.
Okay, now you see it?
Yeah,
Okay,
I do.
great.
I do too.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. A little technology. I got 3 screens here in the room.
No problem.
Yeah, so this is the slide I was referring to, which shows the rise in the CO2 level measured in Hawaii. As I was saying, on this line, there's an oscillation. And in the Northern Hemisphere, which has more plant life, when it's growing, it absorbs CO2. So the CO2 level actually slightly declines. And then when the leaves all fall off the trees in the winter, it rises back up. And what that taught me was the accuracy of the measurement is so accurate that it can measure that type of oscillation. So no one could deny the overall trend of this line. And the Paris Accord is very concerned about keeping the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we're already at 1.1 and rising.
Okay.
Okay, are you seeing the next slide now?
Yes.
What does science say?
I'm not seeing.
Yes, it's up.
Okay, great. So essentially what science says is that we need aggressive strategies to absorb carbon from the atmosphere, which trees and plants do a wonderful job of. But rather than letting that CO2 going back up, we want to sequester the carbon. Okay, so that's what VGrid is really all about. We want to convert the crop residues and the dead trees into electricity and carbon, and then put that carbon in the soil in order to sequester the carbon. So it's really these 2 very simple steps. You capture a carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then you store the captured carbon for a very long period of time. How do we do that? So we have a technology which is called gasification technology. And gasification technology is really combustion. So it's just the burning of the woody biomass or nutshells or even manure, any organic matter, in a sealed vessel, a sealed airtight vessel. So nothing goes into the atmosphere. And by limiting the amount of oxygen that we feed that combustion process, we can determine how much carbon is left over. If I gave it all the oxygen it needed, Like if I had an open campfire, it would absorb all the oxygen and fully burn all the logs in the campfire. And you'd be left with just the gray ash, which is the mineral content of the biomass. But if I limit the amount of oxygen, I can have carbon remaining. Now, for generating electricity, that carbon is playing a very important role because it converts the combustion byproducts of CO2 and water vapor. And Bill pointed out that that's why our planet is greening, is because we have CO2 and water vapor. We can convert those by having them interact with hot carbon and convert them to hydrogen and carbon monoxide. Hydrogen and carbon monoxide are combustible gases. So if we take those two gases and we cool them and clean them, we can put them in an engine. We use a Ford V10 truck engine configured for natural gas, and we can run the engine on those gases and generate electricity. So that's what we do. We take biomass, run it through this gasifier, convert it into hydrogen and CO, cool it, clean it, turn it into electricity. And then the other byproduct that's left over is this carbon. And because the carbon is interacting with water vapor, what happens is that water molecule hits the carbon, the H2 splits off, the other oxygen grabs a carbon and pulls it off and goes off as CO. And every time that happens, you leave a hole in the carbon. So if you look at our carbon, it looks like a sponge. It's got a lot of porosity, a lot of surface area. And that's why it's very effective as a water filter. So if you have a charcoal filter in your freezer making ice, it cleans the water. All of our city water is carbon filtered. It's also an air purifier in that it traps foreign molecules in the carbon and cleans the air. And if you put it in the soil, it absorbs water. So you can grow crops with less water. And it serves as a little bit of a coral reef for soil microbes. So if you've ever looked at a coral reef, you see a lot of sea life hiding in the holes of the coral, and the bigger fish can't eat them. That's what happens in the soil. And the roots find those nutrients, which are concentrated in the coral reef of the carbon. And so you get better nutrient concentration, less waste nutrients, and better crop yield with less fertilizer. I know I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to slide to the last slide. And I think this picture.
You're okay. You're okay. Keep going.
Okay. So this last picture sort of sums it all up really nicely, I think. So it shows the tree, which absorbs the CO2. And then, as I said, when the tree dies, all of that stored carbon would convert to CO2, or if there's moisture present, it would convert to methane and would go back up into the atmosphere. So rather than letting that cycle happen, we interrupt that cycle and we take that biomass, that dead biomass, and we run it through our gasifier, as I said, generate the electricity, and then create the carbon. And so there's a twofold effect here. Not only are we preventing the CO2 from going back up, but we're offsetting the CO2 that would be generated from natural gas powered generation systems. So electricity for electric vehicles has to come from somewhere. And if we're using natural gas to do EV charging stations, we're essentially using a fossil fuel to charge our cars. We're taking internal combustion engines off the road, great. But if we're using fossil fuel to power them, we're not getting as big a benefit as we possibly could. Mm-hmm. So VGrid's story is really taking CO2 offset from fossil fuel generation and using renewable generation. And there are two other advantages of the biomass one. Bill talked about, in fact, showed a really good graph of solar just during the day, and also wind being intermittent. The nice thing about bio is it's on demand. As long as I feed the generator fuel, it'll run 24/7. So it's a good baseload distributed energy generation for the utility. And one of the last things I'll just close with, in fact, yesterday there was a very interesting crypto conference where Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey were talking about Bitcoin mining and the power required for Bitcoin mining and the negative impact on the environment. These machines are ideally suited for Bitcoin mining. In fact, we're working with a company right now generating electricity using bio and powering crypto mining computers. And so if we could situate ourselves in a forest with dead beetle kill trees, convert those trees into electricity, do Bitcoin mining, take the carbon, put it back in the forest and plant new trees, we think we can have a pretty powerful impact on the environment. And with that, I'll close.
Greg, thank you very much for that presentation. That was a really clean and simple way of portraying it. I've been confused by the carbon capture over the months and maybe even years. This is really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I said to Elton yesterday, in California last year, we had a lot of wildfires, and those wildfires generated 112 metric tons of CO2. And in the worldwide, only 1.7 million electric vehicles were sold in 2020. The 112 metric tons of CO2 from our forest fires would be the equivalent of 25 million internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. So the EV is great and I love it and I support it, but it's really scratching the surface. We have a powder keg of dead forests that can go up at any time and just swamp all the benefits of electric vehicles.
Very, very good point. I agree.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think we might have lost our host.
Oh, did we?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Brother
Hey,
Al,
Greg, this is Donna Ford. I have a quick question
Sure.
for you. I live in a very rural area, large farms, mostly it's soybeans, corn,
Yep.
things like that, but a little bit of tobacco, but that seems to be waning. How big a farm does it take to get involved in what you're doing? I mean, do you have large farms involved in your project?
Very good question. Currently, we're in the Central Valley of California, which is pretty large ag. We have 8 systems at a pretty small dairy farm. Dairy farms have high power requirements because they use a lot of water, which they pump. And they have to blow fans on the cows during the hot summers to keep them cool. So the fans consume quite a lot of electrical power. One system of ours will produce 100 kilowatts electric, and it will consume 200 pounds an hour of crop residue. So there's a pretty interesting balance. Corn is a great example because corn is a fairly good sized crop and generates a lot of biomass per acre. So if you had, just a few hundred acres, you could grow enough biomass to power one bioserver and generate electricity year round.
So how much energy would that, say you've got a farm that meets that amount that you were just talking about, could it
Yep.
power parts of a small town or village of some size?
Yes, in fact, we're
Wow.
we're scoping out a project right now in Yosemite where there's a lot of dead beetle kill trees, and we're going to be they're going to put solar in as well, but we're going to be sort of the demand energy source for essentially a microgrid powering a number of houses and other electrical applications. We can array these things together. They're modular.
I may follow up with you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Right.
So we can put 10
I
of
may
these
follow up with you
together and
because I'm
produce
on
a
the county
megawatt.
government here in Virginia.
Uh-huh.
I'm on the county government here in Virginia, and we're trying to explore different ways of getting energy because we have very unreliable power.
Yep.
And in fact, back in February, we had 2 pretty significant ice storms, we lost power for 14 days. So you
Yes.
can imagine the impact to people after being without power for 14 days. So anyway, I won't take up any more time because I know other people have questions, but are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I am. Greg Campbell on LinkedIn.
What is your last name?
Campbell, Campbell.
Okay, thanks a lot. This was a like, really tremendously helpful presentation. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for being here.
Yes.
I have a question. How soon or how long does it take for one of those bioservers to be constructed, or is it mobile, or can you move it to any community that you want to?
That's a very good question. It takes us about 3 months to build one from scratch. We build everything ourselves. We buy the engines, of course, but we basically fabricate the gasifier, all the filtration system, etc. So when we get an order, it takes about 3 months for us to build it. It is mobile. You can see from the picture, it's essentially a car trailer. So you can wheel it around. And it's modular, like I said, so I can stack up to 10 of these next to each other and generate a megawatt of electricity if I have a high power requirement. Or I can just have one unit and produce 100 kilowatt electric.
Is it possible for some of the largest cities to benefit from this, or is it just for some of the smaller communities?
That's another very good question. It depends on what the power requirement is. I think it could be part of a power solution in the sense that, cities probably have some solar. They're probably using maybe fuel cells. They may use wind power if they're in that type of a region. So it could be part of the overall energy solution. We can go up to 3 megawatts. In California, the way our grid is designed is you're allowed to put up to 3 megawatts on the grid in what's called distributed generation. If you try to put more power than that on the grid, then they have to modify the grid circuit. And so it's quite a bit of cost on the utility side to upgrade the grid to accept more power than that. So the distributed generation strategy really in California is having, rather than large centralized natural gas power plants, is to have renewable projects sort of up to 3 megawatts distributed across the grid. So if you had the land, that's the other advantage, by the way, of this, I forgot to mention that, is solar, if you want to do 1 megawatt of electrical power, solar would require 4 acres of land. Because if you've seen with solar panels, they spread out, over a large area. We only need 1/4 acre for 1 megawatt. So we're about 16 times more dense in terms of power generation than solar. So in an urban environment that you're talking about, there's a benefit to having more dense concentrated power because land is a premium, particularly in the urban areas.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Greg, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Wow, man, what an episode! But this is amazing technology, Greg, and I'm having the same problem you had yesterday. But we really want to get your ramp up on all of this, and I'd like to take about 3 to 5 minutes because I was actually planning a series of questions for you and Bill, but you both of the questions, the panel or the people who asked the questions asked pretty amazing questions.
Very good question.
But my question, my question to you is, what's the ramp up capacity? You said once you get an order, you could generally have it in effect in 3 weeks.
3 months.
3 months.
That's an order that drops in out of the blue because we have to buy material and then assemble. But what we're doing is we're having a continuous manufacturing. So we have a build plan, and we can produce in our facility here in Camarillo about 100 machines per year.
Okay. So, but I mean, with the right ramp up conditions, you could move to a East Coast, West Coast model, or everything would be done in your West Coast facility. Okay.
Yes, we have the intention of actually 500 machines in 5 years, and those would be distributed across the United States. In
Uh-huh.
fact, North Carolina was one of our targets, largely because I didn't mention this, but the carbon makes a very good feed additive for poultry, swine, and cows, both dairy and beef.
Okay.
And what it basically does is it improves the digestion so they can gain weight and with less feed because it binds toxins in the feed. So we
Oh,
would
very good.
envision ourselves locating machines in large ag areas like Nebraska, North Carolina, Texas, and California. And then you have distributed biochar production, which could be then moved around the entire East Coast or the entire Midwest or the West Coast.
I guess the biggest question then, your ramp-up model, does it include a investment model? I mean, you know, are you you're not sold on the market or open share market, are you? Are you?
Oh, that's a very good question. In fact, I'm kicking myself for not even addressing that. That's one of the most important points to make.
Yeah, right.
Our business model is, because we don't want our customers to have to come up with, large amounts of money. We basically sell electricity as a service. So we
Okay.
actually own the machine, we operate the machine for the customer, and we only bill the customer on the electricity that they actually consume. So we go in and we take a look at their annual electricity consumption and what they're paying. And you'd be surprised at how all the different taxes and things add up. And then what we do is we offer a reduced cost on their electricity. So the customer benefits right out of the gate. They're paying a lower electricity cost. And the only way we're able to do this is to monetize the carbon. So if we can sell the carbon because of its high value, we can afford to be able to give discounted electricity to our customer.
Very good. Very good. Awesome. Now there we've got 1,001 go-betweens, and we like to probably chime in with you about how to help facilitate what you're trying to get done, and we'll talk that offline. But at this point, I would like to merge with you and Bill, and then we'll move to our next speaker. But there must be essential components aside from the elements that you're proposing, ways that because we're at an urgent pinnacle here, that we really need to start to curb our greenhouse gases. And I mean, I know from my own perspective, we're not doing all we could do recycling wise. And then if you're curbing the use of carbon fuels, that's a big deal. It would curb, the greenhouse gases. But I mean, there must be some other essential objectives that we could achieve to reach some of our end of millennium or new millennium objectives, or our Paris greenhouse gas directives. We really have to find out what we need to do to curb our greenhouse gases. Any ideas come up?
Well, you mentioned recycling, and that raises a whole other issue, which is landfills.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of stuff in landfills, including our human biosolids from sewage plants. And when they go into a landfill, they're starved of oxygen. If there's moisture present, you generate methane.
Okay.
Methane is, like, I can't remember the multiple. I think it's about 20 times worse than CO2 as a greenhouse gas.
It's lethal. It's lethal. It's not really, I mean, as a matter of fact, the pollutants from methane are the items that are adding greater, harm to the greenhouse gas condition. I mean, and we've been using landfills for years, but I don't think we properly recycle. I don't think our recycling models aren't effective. Now in Europe or places like that, Europe and Japan, their recycling models are crucial. I mean, in fact, it's so crucial that if you don't recycle properly, you're fined. There are, citations issued. If you put, I mean, really, if you don't put, your plastics and cardboard in the recycling bin, then, you're issued a citation. Somebody's actually inspecting your refuse. We don't do that here.
Yep. That's a very good point.
So that might have a greater impact on. It would take longer though. We're talking, they're saying 2030. we've got to have some real effective changes take place in order to curb, because otherwise the storms will get worse, the flooding gets worse, the droughts get worse. And so, you know, these are, what's your take, Bill? Bill Pinkney?
Yeah.
Are you on?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to be in control as much as we can. Controlling greenhouse gases, though, and reducing them is a tough thing, because of, you know, there's goods and bads with everything. And the good side of greenhouse gases is they keep us at a warm, comfortable, not a too warm, but a comfortable temperature. So we need to be careful not to shoot ourselves in the foot and try to reduce them completely, as some would argue. But I sure like what I'm hearing from Greg. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. Greg, your solutions are phenomenal. I mean, and you offer some very feet on the ground solutions that we can get great benefit from long term. I'm so sorry. I'd like to spend a little more time with all of you to talk about the issues relevant to our times. And but then we promise that we're going to get a few like you. I mean, Greg, you're amazing. Bill, thank you so much. I appreciate your contributions here. Just for the sake of time, we'll probably have to scoot along. But please be mindful of this channel. We're going to precipitate more effectual discussions, as well as find Greg the kind of client relationship that promote the better development. Because, you know, here in North Carolina, where we're agricultural central, I mean, in some regards, in this part of the state, but even when it comes to farm animals as well as agricultural foods, a big deal. And so how to facilitate those elements for the state, that farmers and the agricultural centers can become stronger and more climate controlled and environment controlled, because the cost models go up. And in fact, we haven't found any solutions that don't cause more saving of costs, but they just are astronomical when it comes to improving and increasing costs.
That's right.
So
yeah, we
in any model.
We need to help our farmers. Our farmers are getting
we do
on all sides.
They're keeping us alive.
Yeah, they are. And then, you know,
they're keeping us alive.
Yeah.
Very busy people. But I mean, the models in most farm and agricultural settings, though, are just driving their cost up, and you know, you're driving farmers out of business.
Absolutely.
And you're to the point where, you know, it costs so much to farm that how can they make a living? How can they really make a living to pay for the expenses and bills?
That's
and
right.
So big deal. So and I love farm food. I love farm food.
And we need to keep electricity at a reasonable cost too.
That's correct.
That's true.
That's correct.
So we can
great ad, especially when it comes to electricity. I mean, there's so many elements that face our environment today. I mean, I don't know what this represents. I mean, but we seem to have our finger on the pulse of some really critical issues. I mean, you got the fires on the West Coast. I mean, in California, it's it's almost like the land is burning out of control. I mean, and you know, and a couple of fires that just there's no recipe. They can't even get a turn on transferring it to control. And so, and how do you, and then, you know, in cases where there's no reserve water to be used to put the fires out.
Yep.
And so it's all got to be done chemically. And so there are a lot of issues, but I tell you, we're going to have a panel. We might even move to a full conference on the environment. We might even move to a full conference on the environment. And facility and execution for solutions. We did a few years ago. We did a RETEC conference in Pennsylvania, and that focused on because that's a big territory agriculture as well. But thank you so much, Greg
You're very
Campbell.
welcome.
Stay on if you can. And Bill, thank you so much. I appreciate your added input. Stay on too. We have to transition now to our next guest speaker. And oh wow, we're so excited about our speaker here. And I don't really know. We've had Dr. John on various times, and he has always contributed vitally to information about health and finding solutions that help us retrieve a great balance in our health and state of mind. He's written 5 books, and each one is just as incredible as the other. And Dr. John Poole and Dr. Loretta will be coming on with him or after. She's after. No, we're having Dr. John now. Dr. John, it's all yours, please. What book are you talking to us about today? I mean,
What would you like me to talk to? We can talk about.
so he gives it back to me. Okay, no, I'm a fan of your diabetes book. So how to move away from being diabetes free with your prescription and suggestion book.
Well, since we are talking about farmers, let's talk about the importance of farming and what type of farming we should do to improve the health of the people.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Yeah, let's start with why do we eat? We eat because human body needs over 100 different nutrients for healthy functioning. Now, we can get supplements and people